Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on verse number 24. Let's chant together. Tasmad Om Ityudaritya Yajnadana Tapav Kriyaha Pravartante Vidhanoktaha Satatam Brahmavadinam. Therefore, the acts of sacrifice, gift, and austerity enjoined by the ordinance on the part of the followers of the Vedas by uttering the word Om are always begun well. In the earlier verse we saw last week that this utterance, Om Tat Sat, one of the most auspicious utterances in the Vedantic tradition. A doubt was raised earlier about, after describing the different ways people do their charity, their worship, their austerities, how it can be done either in a sattvic way, in a rajasic way, or in a tamasic way. The doubt was this, that by and large, most of us do things either in a sattvic way or in a tamasic way. It's only these very small, spiritually advanced people in whom there is this predominance of sattva. They alone do these things in a sattvic way. And then this kind of a feeling of resignation, that, well, will we ever be able to do things in a sattvic way? Will the quality of whatever we do, will it ever reach that level of sattva? And so that's why Krishna begins this last section of this chapter, showing that, yes, there is a way. Even if what we do may not be as perfect as we would like it to be, the power of this Om Tat Sat is such that it can purify what may not be so pure. It can empower what may not be so powerful. In other words, it helps to mitigate to some extent the imperfections that we have while practicing austerities, while doing worship, while even when we are trying to help someone. Because we are not able to do any of these things perfectly, one of the ways of trying to minimize the imperfection is to recognize the enormous power behind this word Om Tat Sat. And that's why now in this set of 4 verses, he will take up each of these words in that Om Tat Sat. What is the significance of Om? What is the significance of Tat? And what is the significance of Sat? So this verse which we read just now describes the significance of Om. That is why he says that all of these 3 acts of sacrifice, gift, and austerity, yajna, dana, and tapas. When these are done by uttering the word Om, they somehow begin well. They somehow become purified. They somehow become more empowered. The Om is often considered the most sacred sound in the Hindu tradition. Although it gets represented, as you can see here, so this is a visual representation of Om. This is not the only way Om gets represented, although this is probably the most prevalent way. In some parts of India, in South, in Tamil language, the Om looks more or less like this, but it's a little bit different. And then there is the Bengali Om. In Bengal, the Om is pretty much like this, except this portion is absent. You can see the Om that we have in the sitting room where we have discussion on Sunday mornings. That Om kind of looks like this, but it's a little bit different. So I just mentioned this to show that while the visual representations of Om might be somewhat different from one another, Om is primarily a sound symbol. It's not really a visual symbol. One of the reasons why the fidelity of the Vedas was maintained was because of this strong faith in the power of sound. You see, Vedas are so old that the Vedic wisdom for generations together was passed on orally. It was long before even people started writing things down. Now we know when things are passed orally from one person to another, often unconsciously, things change. You can see that. I mean, nowadays, of course, with messages forwarding or cut and paste, you can do it in an identical way. But if someone has told you something, and then you are going to narrate it to someone else, often unconsciously, some words get omitted, something gets changed, something gets colored. Now, since for generations together, the Vedic wisdom was passed on orally, how can then we be sure that the Vedas as they have come down to us today are exactly the same as they were when they were initially that wisdom was revealed? Now, this would not have occurred if all that they stressed was just the wisdom of the Vedas. Because then we might say, well, if it's just knowledge, then that knowledge can be expressed in any number of ways. Why be so particular about the words themselves? Now, what maintained the fidelity of the Vedas was that they believed that it's not just the words, it's the sound. That unless the Vedic mantras were uttered exactly as they were revealed to the ancient sages, they would not yield the result that they were meant to give. And because of this, there's this strong emphasis on repeating the Vedas, chanting of the Vedas exactly as it was received. Because even if the sound was slightly changed or modified or revised, it would become ineffective. Now that belief, now today it might seem like, well, what does it matter? In fact, the Gita that we are studying now, I studied it in English. This is not, obviously, Krishna didn't teach Arjuna in English. We might say, well, we're really discussing it in a different language, but the ideas are same. Of course they are same. Now, because of this, we don't feel so much the need to kind of go back to the original source. For that matter, we don't even know whether Krishna taught Arjuna in Sanskrit. We don't know that either. Now, the Vedic wisdom, though, they didn't simply emphasize the knowledge that came, but they emphasized the words and especially the sound through which that knowledge was shared. Now, because of this, the accuracy of the Vedas has been maintained. Now, Om in the Vedas is considered the most sacred sound. Now, what's a big deal about Om if we really want to understand it rationally? Not all of these things can be questioned in a logical way, but there is a way to understand why Om became such a most sacred sound. We won't go into too many details, but just the broad outline. In order to understand the significance of Om, it is important to know the connection between sound, the word, and the object. For instance, now here is this book, holding a book in my hand. Now, when I say book, now what exactly is occurring? Well, book is a word. When I utter the word book, some sound is created, because otherwise you wouldn't hear the word unless I make the sound book. So there is the sound book, there is the word that is book, and then there is the object which is signified by that. So there are these three distinct things: the sound, the word, and the object. Now, a great amount of study has been done to discover the relationship between these three things: the sound, the word, and the object. In fact, the word for an object in Sanskrit and in many Indian languages, it's called padartha. Now, pada means word, artha means meaning, and padartha is really referred to any object. So in some sense, what I'm holding in my hand is a word meaning. So the meaning of the word book, this is the meaning of the word book. That's what padartha means. If we look at the story of the Genesis, for instance, in the Bible, when we read about when God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Now, one way of trying to understand that would be, but when we try to make something, if I try to make a wooden object, then I would need the raw material, I would need some instrument to shape it in this way, and then I can make it. Now, how did God make this world? And we see sometimes, like, let there be light, there was light. So essentially, all that God did was just utter the word light. Well, light, you understand, I'm not sure whether he uttered in English or whichever way, but he uttered, the thing was, behind the word is the thought. And in order to express that thought, you have to utter a sound. And that's why you read, the Gospel of John begins with, "In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God." So this idea in one form or other, it's not something that is there only in the Hindu tradition. You'll find it in one way or the other, it gets expressed in many different traditions. So that thought which gets expressed through sound when we utter a word, and then a corresponding object is created. Now, every object in this world, living and non-living, has a name. Even if you don't know the specific name of an object, every object has a generic name and a specific name. For instance, now, I may not know the exact name of this, the specific name of this, but I can even refer to this object and saying this. So this, or in Sanskrit, idam, is a generic name for any object. Generally, if it is nearby, we say this. If it is far away, we say that. But that can be used for anything. This person, this object, this carpet, this tree, this river, just can be anything. So every object in this world has a name, and in order to utter that name, you have to make sound. Now, they also did a lot of research on what are the different kinds of sounds we are capable of making. Now, of course, all this, as I've said, all our discussion on all our philosophy is a very human-centric philosophy. After all, it's human beings who are trying to figure out. And so everything is done from a perspective of human beings. So what are the kind of sounds we are capable of making? And, well, so they just concentrated on this part, this voice box that we have here. And according to their way of tabulating, they found that we are capable of making 50 distinct sounds. And that's why the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet have 50 letters, each letter signifying a distinct sound. So when we were young, and those of us who studied Sanskrit, we had to memorize these. Ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, cha, cha, ja, cha, nya. So now, while making each of these, while making the sound, uttering each of these letters, a different part of this voice box is touched. And that, so you can see how deep they went. For instance, and then all of these discoveries were put in the form of sutras, aphorisms. One of the aphorisms, for instance, is Akuha Visarjaniyanam Kantaha. So this, the base of the throat. So when you say the sound actually comes from here. Then ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, ha, all this sound emerges from here. And so they have these, of all these, so all the mapping of the 50 distinct sounds was done. What kind of sounds are uttered when the tongue touches the teeth? And they say, L, T, T, Th, D, Dh, N. Try making these sounds and you will see that your tongue will be touching your teeth. Or if you say P, P, B, B, M, P, say P or P, P, B, B. Try uttering the word B without touching your lips, you won't be able to do it. So that's how they mapped it, okay? Now, so this, remember why we are doing all the discussion, to understand the thing about Om. Now, Om is a kind of an, I wouldn't say it's an acronym, something similar to that. For instance, if something is big and we want to shorten it, we use a kind of an acronym. We kind of try to shorten it. For instance, now, if you want to spell out the full name of a country, we say United States of America. Well, it's a mouthful. It's a big name. And so what do we do normally? We just say USA. Now, what have we actually done? Well, United States of America, off the generally, don't worry, it's too small. It can be. So U, the first letter of every word is taken. And when you say USA, you at once know you are really meaning United States of America. And that word is not just 3 words, it really refers to this big country. So you can see the way of shortening. The big country gets represented by just this name, United States of America, and then gets further shortened to USA. Now, how would we, if we want to make a list of all the objects in this world, living and non-living, well, there are unbelievable. It's like, I don't even know there is even a name for it, like trillions. I mean, there is just any number, almost you could say countless number of objects. Now, how can you then list all these objects? And one of the ways of doing that is, no matter what object it is, every object has a name, and all of these names, from the Sanskrit perspective, is made up of these 50 letters. Sometimes it is said, a story is told of a person who used to pray daily. He wasn't much educated, so he had a small prayer book, and he always said his morning prayers, noon prayers, looking at that book. And one day it so happened that the book was lost. He couldn't find it, and he had done it for years, and he was very agitated. He said, well, I won't be able to pray now because my book is missing. I'm not smart enough to kind of compose my own prayer, and what will I do? And then suddenly he got an idea. So he goes to the shrine, and bowing down before the altar, he just recites all the letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, he does say. And recognizing that no matter what prayer it is composed of really all these letters. So he tells the Lord, today the book is not there, but all prayers have these letters, so you please arrange them in a way and get it done. Well, what else can you do? But that's important. No matter what prayer it is made up of just the letters of the alphabet. So no matter what prayer it is, no matter what word it is capable of, it can be expressed only through these 50 distinct sounds that we can make. Now, just as we can condense United States of America to USA, how can we then now condense these 50 sounds, which really represent every object in this creation? And they just did simply this. They took the first letter and the last letter. In a sense, this way. So in this voice box, the furthermost part here is the deep part of the throat. And the other extreme is lips here. And the first sound here is a. For the sound we need lips for is m, m. And the rolling sound is this u. So om actually, although sometimes gets translated as om, it's actually 3 letters of the alphabet. A, U, M. So it's really om. So it begins here. Om. So when you say it's actually your lips get closed. So it's condensing or abbreviating the 50 sounds into these 3 sounds, a, u, ma, because all of these sounds are sufficient to designate everything in this creation. So when you say Om, you are really referring to this entire creation. That's why the Upanishad says that Om iti idam sarvam, all this is Om. Now this might seem like, well, what is this Om? So if at all, any time in future, you have a question about Om, now you have some background for why Om is considered so sacred, because it is a kind of a shorthand for everything in this universe. It stands for the entire creation. Let's get back to verse 24 now. Therefore, the acts of sacrifice, gift, and austerity enjoined by the ordinance on the part of the followers of the Vedas, by uttering the word Om, are always begun well. And because of that, everything that we do, and it's so good to make that this practice a habit, especially for Vedanta students. As often as you can, just say Om. If when you're by yourself, you can say it aloud. Don't go on saying it Om everywhere and everywhere. People may not know, and they might say, what's wrong with you? There was a cartoon I saw the other day where one big yogi is sitting and just saying Om. And a few cows are standing and listening to it and saying, that person has got it all wrong. It's just kind of opposite, because they just say moo. So, but it's a very uplifting, and that's one of the reasons we begin our satsang, our classes, with chanting of Om. So even when you begin the day, saying you just sit and just say it aloud to yourself. It can be done even mentally. It doesn't have to be aloud, But if you're just by yourself, even if you say it aloud, it's extremely uplifting, the power of Om. And that's what he refers to in this verse. Verse number 25. Tadityanabhisandhaya phalam yajnatapah kriyaha dana kriyascha vividhaha kriyante moksha kankshibhihi. Uttering tat, the various acts of sacrifice, austerity, and charity are performed by the seekers of liberation without aiming at their fruit. So again, what is the significance of tat? Oftentimes, all of these acts can be done, all of this puja, worship, the word tat also purifies the seeker, purifies the student who does all of these things with the uttering of the word tat. Verse 26. Sadbhave sadhubhave cha sadityetat prayujyate prashaste karmani tatha Satshabdav partha yujyate. Sat is used to denote existence and goodness. So also, O Partha, the word Sat is used for any auspicious act. The word Sat, the word Satchidananda is a fairly well-known designation of the divine. So the first part, Sat, there stands for existence or being. In fact, our true nature is Satchidananda, means existence, consciousness, and bliss. Of these three, we are already aware of our existence. In other words, we may not yet know that our true nature is pure consciousness because we feel still the very physical, very material parts are still, I feel, that's who I am. I may not yet have experienced this highest bliss, which is unmixed with pain and suffering. But existence is something we all have experienced. Because there's no sane person can say, I wonder if I exist. That doubt is meaningless. Why is that doubt meaningless? Because the question is, who is doubting? Does the doubter exist or not? So it's kind of a logical fallacy. I cannot question my existence because my question wouldn't be valid if the questioner didn't exist. And if the questioner didn't exist, well, the question itself doesn't have to be answered. And therefore, we can legitimately question the existence of anything apart from ourselves. That's valid. In fact, I could question the existence of all of this, whether does this really exist? But I cannot never ask whether do I exist. That is not possible. In dream, for instance, I mean, dream we see everything around us, and it doesn't really exist. But the dreamer, the one who is dreaming, does exist. Because if the dreamer didn't exist, the dream wouldn't be there. And so Sat stands for existence. And it also stands for goodness. We speak about a person being a good person. So that is why there is this term that gets used in Sanskrit, Sat Purusha, a good person. A company of those who are good. The word satsang that we have for Sunday, you find there is Sat there. That again stands for company of good people, a company of the community of good people. That's what satsang means. And it's used for any auspicious act. So anything that is good and holy and sacred is also referred to by the word sat. So one by one, Krishna is showing the sanctity, the power and the beauty of each of these terms, Om, Tat and Sat. Now one more, next verse also will speak about Sat. Verse 27. Yadne tapasidane cha sthiti saditi chochyate karma chaiva tadarthiyam sadityeva bhidhiyate. Steadiness in sacrifice, austerity and gift is also called sat. As also work, even done indirectly for the sake of the Lord, is verily called sat. So doing all that we do in life with the steadiness, think about it this way. We have to ask, how many of the things that we do regularly, daily, are done steadily? How many of the things are like, well, today I do it, some days I don't do it, some days I do it again? Well, that's not steadiness. But steadiness means I have a certain discipline associated with that activity. So if there is a discipline associated with that activity, then that is sat. And he says, everything that we do for the Lord, anything that is done as an act of worship, directly or indirectly, even that is called sat. Now directly would mean, and we have seen this on other occasions, that worship can be done in many ways. There is one kind of worship, the word that is most commonly understood to mean in a place, in a temple or a church or a synagogue. There is a special way of doing different rituals, and we call that a worship. Now that we might say is a rather direct meaning of the term worship, and a most popular way of understanding worship. But in Vedanta, we know that there are other ways of worshipping. Now, in the spirit of Karma Yoga, for instance, if a hungry person comes before me and says, I'm hungry, could you please feed me? Now, I can feed that person thinking that, well, it's an act of charity. Here is a person in need, I'm helping this person. And that's true. But I can do the same thing with a completely different set of mind. If I remember that God is present in everyone and in everything, then God is present even in this person who has come to me and who is hungry. In fact, what I will see is, if this entire creation is nothing but the presence of God, nothing but filled with the divine, it's God who has taken the form of the hungry person and come before me. Now, in the temple, when I worship God, I use flowers, I use incense, I use sandal paste. Now, when God comes to me in the form of a hungry person, I can't say, wait, here is this incense and here is this flower. God as a hungry person doesn't need your flower. God as a hungry person needs food. But if I remember that this is not just a hungry human being in need of my help, but here is God in the form of a hungry person, and I'm now, by giving this food, I'm really worshipping God who has come to me as a hungry person. If I do it with that spirit, I get the same benefit as I would if I were to worship God in a temple. And this is not just about a hungry person, really with anything in life. Those who are in healthcare business or in taking care of patients, again, God can come to me as someone who is in need of treatment. And doctors can be doing their job and also worshipping at the same time. Lawyers can be doing and worshipping at the same time. Teachers say, God has come to me in the form of a student. So a teacher can be worshipping the student by teaching. And a student can see that God has come to me in the form of the teacher. And if the student learns well, does everything, carries out the responsibility of a student well, the student is also worshipping. So anything in life, so long as it is ethical and moral, it can be done as an act of worship. That's the idea. So even that kind of activity is called Sat. So in these set of 4 verses, Krishna describes how Om, Tat and Sat, each of these helps to remove or minimize the imperfections in the act of worship that we do, in our austerities, our spiritual practices that we do, in the kind of charity that we do. So whatever work we do, in whichever circumstances, if it is accompanied with this awareness of sanctity. In other words, for spiritual seekers, it's not enough to limit their spiritual identity to only, say, twice a day. Suppose your guru, your teacher has told you, meditate twice a day. Meditate in the morning and evening. Now, if I'm asked to meditate in the morning and evening, and let's say if I meditate for half an hour in the morning and say an hour in the evening, does that mean that I'm a spiritual seeker only for an hour and a half every day? Or if I go to a place of worship, say every Sunday, am I a spiritual seeker once a week? But if I'm a spiritual seeker, I'm a spiritual seeker all the time. So I need to find ways to affirm my spiritual identity, even when I'm not meditating, even when I'm not reading a scripture, even when I'm going about my day-to-day activities, doing what most people would consider secular work. Now, you don't have to go about trying to convince everyone, oh, this is not secular, this is very spiritual. Let others look at it in whichever way they want. But you, deepest in your heart, it's possible to do everything as a spiritual activity. And we've seen this. This idea is not new here. Throughout in the Gita, Krishna has showed how every little thing that we do, including, in like one place he says, including the closing and opening of the eyelids, even that can be done as an act of worship. So nothing is insignificant, provided we remember that the world is filled with divine, inside and outside. Just keeping that awareness of the presence of God everywhere, we'll be able to maintain that spirit of sanctity. We can see that when you go to a place of worship, or when you're standing before the altar, when you are in a temple, you somehow, most sincere seekers of God, feel a little bit different. Now, can I maintain that feeling I have when I'm standing before the altar, even when I go to a mall, even when I am on Wall Street, even when I am vacuuming my room, or even when I am gardening? If I can feel that same sense of sanctity, that's what spiritual progress means. Because it's very good to be very pious and holy for a few minutes once a week. That's easy. Many people feel that, well, that's all the time I have for religion. And okay, I mean, that's something is better than nothing. But if you truly want to see yourself as a spiritual seeker, then authenticity, an authentically spiritual seeker would be a spiritual seeker all the time, everywhere. I cannot be a part-time spiritual seeker. That doesn't work that way. Verse number 28. Ashraddhaya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chayat asadityuchyate partha nacha tat pretya no iha. offering oblations, making gifts, austerities practiced, or anything else done without faith are called asat, O Partha. They fructify neither hereafter nor here. So, everything that is done with Shraddha, with faith, everything, that's what the significance of Om Tat Sat is, because you recognize the presence of God within you and outside you. Everything done with that faith will empower you, will yield the result, will produce spiritual progress and benefit. But that which is done without faith, it's possible to do everything, do austerities, you do worship, you do everything, but no faith. Then he says here, Krishna says, that will not yield any result, neither here nor there. That's why if some people think that I can cheat and loot and not lead an ethical, moral life, and then do some big worship, or give some big donation to a place of worship, and then feel, now I have my passport to heaven because I've done it. Doesn't work that way. You can't, none of us can fool God. We can fool ourselves. We can fool other people. Although not all the time. Isn't it said you can fool some of the people all of the time, all of the people some of the time. You can never fool all of the people all of the time. But you can never fool God anytime. So that's why that's why this chapter is titled Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yoga, the three kinds of Shraddha, the three ways, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, that all activities get done. Now, without faith, none of these will fructify. And this idea will continue in the first few verses of the next chapter, which we will begin next week. So with this, we come to the end of chapter 17. So if you have any comments, questions, thoughts, ideas, you're welcome.
So Swamiji, it seems as though if we want to see those around us as godly, one way to cheat is to actually choose godly people to spend more of our time with. So if we either seek those activities which also attract more similar spiritual beings, or it's possibly an easier way to start seeing all those around us as being godly?
I think we can begin trying to see God in places and people where it is first easy to see. Let's begin with one at least. Because the idea is this: if I can truly feel the presence of God in someone, then there is hope. If I can see it in one person, well, maybe if I try a little harder, I may be able to see it in one more person. So, small beginnings, small steps. We can't simply say, oh, beginning tomorrow, I'm trying to see God in everyone. I mean, you can try to see God, but don't be discouraged if you don't see God straight away in everyone. The irony of the situation is this: we keep saying God is everywhere, and we don't see God anywhere. So how come that one who is everywhere cannot be seen anywhere? And so why not begin by seeing God at least somewhere? And that somewhere, that some form, that some idea, that some person or some place might be different for different people, which is okay. But it'll be good that there is something in our life which provides a sense of connection to the divine. That, oh, here is this one thing, and that thing, as I said, could be a symbol, an idea, a person, a place. It could be anything or anyone. But if there is something which reminds me or takes me, or where I can feel the presence of God easily, that is what brings a little bit of stability in my life. And through that, then, I can try then to expand my awareness and see God everywhere.
Swamiji, I think at the start you asked the question about do I exist?
Mm-hmm.
And that question is valid because there should be somebody to ask. Then the question of do you exist, is it a true question?
Yeah, as I said, it's a valid question.
But the answer is no. The ultimate answer.
Actually, the ultimate answer is this. Existence of anyone and anything apart from you can never be proved or disproved. It can only be, you can raise legitimate questions about it. Yeah, that's what ultimately you can say, well, ultimately when you discover you are all that exists, that time, but you are not going to that time argue with anyone, but there is nobody else or anything. That's what I'm saying. Because there is nobody else to argue with that time. And therefore, in Vedanta, they very quickly gave up this preoccupation with the reality or the unreality of the world around us. Although the popular saying about Vedanta, Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya, Brahman is real, the world is unreal, I can understand the sense in which it is said, but if you see the Vedantic inquiry itself, it doesn't bother about the world at all. The word that is sometimes gets used in Vedanta for the world is tuchha. Tuchha means don't waste your time over it. What in Vedanta they are more concerned with is who I am. That at present my identity is so much one with this, which is why I feel, well, I came into being a few years ago when I was born, which is why there is this anxiety or fear related to death, because this means what will happen after I die? So what does this question of I and my death would mean? Because we see when people die, essentially the body becomes non-functional. And of course the body is burnt or cremated. And they say, oh, I'll die, then I will be burnt, I'll be cremated. So that was the question that in the Kathopanishad also, Nachiketa asked that question to Yama, what happens when people die? Because we do read about someone said, oh, you go to heaven or you go to hell. No one has proved it. There is no proof for it. It's just a question of belief. Whether anyone really goes anywhere after death or everything, because all that we see is a heap of ashes, a heap of dust. So the inquiry into Vedanta is not so much about this world, because people can go on endlessly debating, arguing about this, and no one is ever going to come to any definitive conclusion. People will just end up saying, this is what I believe, and someone says, well, this is what I believe. I will say, this is what my book says. They will say, that is what their book says. It's never going to come to any conclusion. And so their preoccupation is not with the world itself, but with who I am really. Where did I come from? Did I exist before I was born? Would I continue to exist after I am dead? So that's the inquiry in Vedanta, not so much about the world. Therefore, whether I exist, and in what is I exist, as I said, I definitely know I exist. But is my existence a human existence or anything beyond? If my existence is inseparable from the existence of this body or not. And this answer to this question is completely independent about whether you exist or not. So spending my time and energy in trying to find out whether you exist or not is a waste of time, because I keep on wondering whether you exist or not, and then one day I die without getting an answer. So it's waste of time. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Swamiji, would you please explain what is God? Because if I'm trying to see God in someone, then I try to compare because what I think about God. So the characterized by God and all-pervading. So I don't see in human being that. So what is God, and how I can see God in everywhere?
Well, there is really no one answer to that question, because God is such a loaded term in many ways that everyone has a different idea about who God is. A more general way of describing God, as it is in Brahma Sutras, for instance, is God is one from whom all of this has come. God is one in whom all of this thing rests, and God is one into whom all of this returns. Now, this explains the existence of the world. Well, it has come from God, it dwells in God, and it goes back to God. But this definition is not that helpful, because it really doesn't tell us who God is apart from the world. I mean, God as a creator would make sense only when we speak of creation. Who was God? Well, God was not a creator before God created this world, right? So before the world was created, who was God? That's the kind of question we can ask. And let me give you one answer, one possible answer, and this may not be the answer for everyone. The way I try to understand it is this, one way of understanding, that within me, there is something unchanging within me. When I was born, I just weighed a few pounds. Now I weigh much more. So my body has changed, my mind has changed, my thoughts, feelings, emotions have changed in the different stages of life I have passed through. And yet, in spite of all these changes in the body and mind, I still feel, well, I'm still the same person. So there is something in me which has remained unchanged. Now, just as in the midst of all these changes here, something has remained unchanged. If I look at this entire creation, entire universe, which is also changing all the time. Now, behind all the changes in the universe, something must have remained unchanged, just like something has remained unchanged here. And one way of thinking is that which has remained unchanged within me is the Atman, the spirit, which is unchangeable. That which has remained unchanged behind this entire creation is Brahman, or in a popular language, God. And what spiritual life really means is trying to discover how is the unchanging here related with that big unchanging thing. And because of different kinds of relationships are possible, the different schools of philosophy have come. So those who feel the unchanging here is this little unchanging and this big unchanging God, so this unchanging will forever be a child of that big unchanging. So those are dualistic schools of philosophy, that yes, we are, that big unchanging loves this little unchanging, and we can live eternally together in heaven. One other way philosophical school is that this little unchanging here is a part of that big unchanging. So all of us taken together make that whole. So we are this, I am this part of that big whole. Now this is called Vishishta Advaita, a school of qualified non-dualism. And then the Advaita school, non-dualistic school, says the unchanging here and the unchanging there are one and the same. And then, of course, the question is, well, how can it be? Isn't that a big unchanging? And this is the little unchanging here? And then the Upanishads and Vedanta, they keep on asking, but why is this unchanging become little? What makes this unchanging little? And then we say, well, the container is little. The body, the mind are little, And so this unchanging appears little. And that unchanging appears big because the body of the world is bigger than my little body. So it's a little bit like if I go to the ocean, I go to the Atlantic Ocean, I go to the beach, I take one tiny little cup in my hand, and I take one big container in my hand, and I go straight inside water and fill up both those containers. Now that little cup will say, oh, I'm a tiny little ocean. Well, I'm a small Atlantic. And the big container will say, well, I'm a big Atlantic. And why is this Atlantic? Well, essentially it's the same water of the same ocean. But this one feels I'm small because the container is small. This one feels I'm big because the container is big. Well, if I empty them back into the water, they're one and the same. And therefore, according to the Advaitins, this little unchanging is not really little. And that big unchanging is not really big because little and big are very relative terms. And so you remove the casing, remove the covering, it's one. That's the idea.
Swamiji, so Advaita Vedanta and Vishishta Vedanta, what they have in common is that there is some connection between the small unchanging and the big.
Yeah. I mean, there is a connection even in dualism. I mean, in Advaita, there is a connection, there is a relationship as a father and a son. So they are related, but they are distinct.
So I guess it's a minor, to me at least, it doesn't really matter whether it's dual or non-dual, because there is some kind of connection, and what matters is that I keep that connection open.
Pardon? Huh?
It just seems a minor to me, whether or not it's Advaita or Vishishta or dual.
Yeah.
Because it's at the end of the day, there is some relationship.
Yeah.
And what matters is that there is some relationship. So, but Swamiji, you mentioned also about the focus is on who I am. Thich Nhat Hanh has this word that he uses, interbeing, which is the sense that I exist because you exist, I think that's what it means. But if I is a social construction, which is that it's in part created by what society tells me. Let's just say hypothetically we had a child that was born in a jungle and raised by Adi Shankaracharya and is told from day one that you don't exist. Brahman is the ultimate reality. Will that child grow up to have a sense of I?
Sure, because this is not the first birth of that child, because there is always a rebirth. The child already come with the past impressions. Yeah. That's why all little children all look very angelic until they grow up. Because old samskar, yeah.
Thank you. Swamiji, two questions. One is you were talking about God. Is God related to this word Sat?
Yes.
Then how is it related?
Well, God is existence itself. I mean, people say God exists, and what Vedanta really says is God not only exists, God is one with existence. In other words, you cannot question the existence of God, because that would be like questioning the existence of existence. In fact, the Upanishad says, if someone says God doesn't exist, that is like saying I don't exist. That's the idea.
And I wanted to ask, maybe you talked about this before, the complete 3 words, Om Tat Sat. Is that what does that mean? Oh, completely.
Means, in very simple language, it alone means God alone exists, or the divine being alone exists. And that's another way of saying that is all existence. That's all. And God pervades everyone and everything. That's the idea. Yeah. Okay. So we'll stop here today. So with this we come to the end of chapter 17. When we meet next week, we will begin chapter 18. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. On Sunday, we have a guest speaker, Professor Francis X. Clooney of Harvard Divinity School. He will speak on how Mary matters to Christians at Christmas. I encourage all of you to come. It will be a very enlightening talk. On next Wednesday, as I said, we will start a study of chapter 18 of the Gita. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual. So you're welcome for all of these programs. Let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.